Alrighty, everybody, we're on spring break, so I will not be able to do a live stream tonight, but we're going to do one quick vlog breaking down Donald Trump's defamation lawsuit against ABC News and George Stephanopoulos. If you don't know how dirty the media plays, I don't know where you've been for the last little while, they play dirty, and this is a fine illustration just how dirty they play. Now, for those of you who don't know, there was a viral clip about a week and a half ago of George Stephanopoulos interviewing Nancy Mace, asking her a question: how do you not feel guilty? How do you square voting for someone who is found liable for rape when you yourself are a rape victim? And Nancy Mace went on to let George Stephanopoulos have it. And what's amazing is that we're talking about one screen, two films here. You had the left saying George Stephanopoulos really asked Nancy Mace a tough question. You had those on the right saying Nancy Mace really stuck it to George Stephanopoulos. I watched that video. I felt dirty after looking at George Stephanopoulos, but that might just be my political bias here. But if you haven't seen that clip, I'm going to show you that clip now, and then I won't have to read through the section of the defamation lawsuit where Trump explains what occurred during that interview.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
And I answered it. You're shaming me for my political choices.
I'm asking you a question about why you endorse someone who's been found liable for rape.
It was not a criminal court. This was
a civil court.
It was a civil court. And by the way, she joked about the judgment and what she was going to do with all that money, and I find that offensive.
I'm asking you about the man
as a rape victim who's been shamed for years now because of her rape, you're trying to shame me again by asking me this political question.
You've repeated that again.
I think it's offensive. As a woman, I find it offensive. For my political choices, I've endorsed the man that I believe is best for our country. It's not Joe Biden. And you looked at the dueling rallies yesterday in Georgia. Laken Riley's family was with Donald Trump. They weren't with Joe Biden. The same guy yesterday that apologized for calling her killer an illegal, who was an illegal. And here you are trying to shame a rape victim. I find it disgusting.
I mean, you keep saying I'm shaming you.
You are. The question, it is.
How is the question asking you about a presidential candidate who's been
You're asking a rape victim.
And there's no question about that. And you've courageously talked about that.
Because I've been raped. I think that's disgusting.
No, I'm questioning your political choices because you're supporting
me. You're
someone who's been found liable for rape. Actually, I'm not trying to shame you.
You are. That's exactly
what you're doing. You're not answering the question.
And I think it's disgusting.
Well, you're welcome to say that, but you also have to answer the question. Why are you supporting someone who's been found liable for rape?
So that's the clip. You see what George Stephanopoulos does there. He tells Nancy Mace that Trump has been found liable for rape. Now, the only problem with that is that as a matter of fact and law, Trump was specifically found not liable to have raped E. Jean Carroll. For those of you who don't know the story, E. Jean Carroll filed 2 lawsuits against Donald Trump. One was in virtue of a law that was magically passed that expanded the window for adults to file claims for battery, sexual abuse. E. Jean Carroll conveniently exploited that newly passed legislation, which, according to her attorney, she was pivotal in having passed. She filed a claim. She succeeded on her claim, and Donald Trump denied having done what E. Jean Carroll says he did, even after he was found liable, said he didn't do it. So she sued him for defamation, for calling her crazy, saying she made up the whole story, denying that he raped her, and she actually succeeded on that claim, and he was ordered to pay you know all of that, by the way, $91 million. $65 million in punitive damages. It's being appealed, obviously. It's an outrageous injustice, obviously. But the bottom line, as one can see from the jury verdict form, which is an exhibit in Trump's defamation case, Trump was specifically found not liable to have raped E. Jean Carroll. He was found liable to have sexually abused E. Jean Carroll, but apparently having been found liable of sexual abuse in a totally partisan hack court system is not enough for the left. They're not happy with sexual abuser. They need rapists. And they want to call Trump a rapist at all costs, and the corrupt judge in that case, Judge Lewis Kaplan, knew as much. And so somehow, miraculously, even after Trump was found not liable to have raped E. Jean Carroll, Judge Kaplan, through legal sophistry that can only be explained by mental gymnastics and absolute insanity, managed nonetheless to come to the conclusion in one of his rulings that Trump did indeed digitally rape E. Jean Carroll. And that's going to be pivotal in my view as to what's going to happen in this lawsuit, because Trump is suing Stephanopoulos for having said that Trump was found liable for rape. He's suing ABC News. He's suing ABC News, Stephanopoulos' employer, and I have a bad feeling that this lawsuit is going to get tossed on the basis that these statements are substantially true, specifically because of the corrupt finding of Judge Kaplan. But before we even get there, let's just look over the lawsuit. Smartly enough, Trump filed this lawsuit in a favorable district, that of the Southern District of Florida. President Donald J. Trump, an individual plaintiff, versus American Broadcasting Companies, Inc., a Delaware corporation, ABC News, Inc., a Delaware corporation, and George Stephanopoulos, an individual. Complaint and demand for jury trial. Nature of the action: this is an action arising from defendant's transmission and publication of intentionally false and defamatory statements made to numerous third parties about plaintiff President Donald J. Trump, more specifically and as set forth in greater detail below. On Sunday, March 10, 2024, defendant George Stephanopoulos, during the airing of his weekly television show, This Week with George Stephanopoulos, falsely stated on several occasions that plaintiff had been found liable by multiple juries for the rape of Ms. E. Jean Carroll. These statements were and remain false and were made by defendant Stephanopoulos with actual malice or with a reckless disregard for the truth, given that defendant Stephanopoulos knows that these statements are patently and demonstrably false. Indeed, the jury expressly found that plaintiff did not commit rape, and as demonstrated below, defendant George Stephanopoulos was aware of the jury's finding in this regard, yet still falsely stated otherwise. We go through the parties, we go through the jurisdiction, and then we summarize the proceedings as relates to E. Jean Carroll. There were two separate lawsuits, Carroll Lawsuit 1 and Carroll Lawsuit 2, and I'll read from the lawsuit. Donald Trump's lawsuit against Stephanopoulos and ABC News. On November 24, 2022, Carroll filed a separate lawsuit which was related to the Carroll 1 lawsuit, wherein she brought claims for battery and defamation against the plaintiff. The claims brought in the Carroll 2 lawsuit stemmed from the same incident that allegedly took place at Bergdorf Goodman, but Carroll brought an additional claim for battery against plaintiff. In her battery claim, Carroll alleged that plaintiff's actions, quote, constituted sexual offenses as defined in Article 130 of the New York Penal Law, including but not limited to rape in the first degree, rape in the third degree, sexual abuse in the first degree, sexual abuse in the third degree, sexual misconduct, and forcible touching. And then we get to the verdict, in which the jury specifically came to the finding that no, Trump was not liable for rape. As to the first count for battery, the jury was expressly asked to render a determination as to whether plaintiff raped Carroll. The verdict form is clear. The jury determined that Carroll failed to prove her allegation of rape and found plaintiff not liable as to that allegation, and there you have an image from the jury verdict form itself. The jury made a finding of sexual assault and, as a result, found for Carroll on the battery claim and the defamation claim. The Carroll 2 verdict is currently the subject to an appeal brought by plaintiff, styled as Carroll v. Trump, and then you have the court number there. And this is perhaps one of the most important allegations in Trump's defamation lawsuit against Stephanopoulos, because it relates specifically to what Carroll did with her other lawsuits as relates to substituting the term rape for sexual abuse. Shortly after the Carroll 2 verdict, Carroll sought to amend her complaint in Carroll 1 due to the issuance of the verdict. See Carroll 1, motion to amend, correct and related filings. Notably, in the amended complaint, Carroll replaced every mention of, quote, rape, end quote, in the initial complaint with, quote, sexual assault, end quote, given that the Carroll 2 jury did not make a finding of rape in its verdict. The reason why this is so important is pretty much self-explanatory. After the verdict in Carroll 2, Carroll went back to amend her Carroll 1 complaint to replace every word of allegations of rape with sexual abuse because of the finding in the Carroll 2 verdict. So even Carroll knew that no jury found Donald Trump liable for rape, and yet somehow Stephanopoulos keeps repeating this lie as per the excerpt with Nancy Mace. I'll read through it, actually, because reading through it makes it even more shockingly dishonest. Throughout the interview, Stephanopoulos wrongly asserted as supposed fact that plaintiff was, quote, found liable for rape, end quote, more than 10 times as follows. Quote, you endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape, end quote. Quote, Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by jury. It's been affirmed by a judge, end quote. Quote, I'm asking you a question about why you endorsed someone who's been found liable for rape, end quote. And the list goes on, you can read it yourself. But even worse than that, after ABC and Stephanopoulos were made aware of the factually incorrect nature of the statement Stephanopoulos made, they didn't go delete the article, retract it, issue an apology. They went and stealth-edited the headline of the article, thus confirming that they in fact knew that it was factually incorrect, but they do the stealth edit nonetheless and hope nobody notices once the damage is done. Here are those allegations. Paragraph 49, of particular note, Stephanopoulos specifically asked Carroll, quote, how about yesterday in the courtroom? The first announcement was made, and it was that he was not found liable for rape. What were you thinking at that moment, end quote. Paragraph 50, given Stephanopoulos' knowledge of the actual verdicts in Carroll 1 and Carroll 2, and given his vast experience as a journalist, his repeated statements that plaintiff was found liable for rape were false, intentional, malicious, malicious and designed to cause harm. Paragraph 51, Stephanopoulos knew that his statements about plaintiff were false, yet made them in any event. After the interview aired, plaintiff's representatives contacted defendants seeking a retraction of the false and defamatory statements made during the interview, as well as an apology for making the false and defamatory statements. Defendants did not issue an apology, did not issue a retraction, and did not direct or request that Stephanopoulos correct the various defamatory and false statements he made during his show. Rather, instead of removing the interview from its media presence and issuing a public statement correcting Stephanopoulos' false and defamatory statements, ABC instead modified the headline of a related article from, quote, Nancy Mace defends her support for Trump after he was found liable for rape, end quote, to, quote, Nancy Mace defends her support for Trump after he was found liable for sexual assault, end quote. I'm telling you, I have a bad feeling this defamation lawsuit is getting tossed specifically because of the corrupt actions of that Judge Kaplan afterwards as to how he magically found Trump had nonetheless indeed digitally raped Carol. We'll get there in a second, but now Trump in his allegations goes on to highlight the damage caused by this, and who comes up in spreading disinformation in this lawsuit? None other than Aaron Rupar. And for those of you who may not know who Aaron Rupar is, I suggest you go check the Urban Dictionary because the definition there of Rupar is quite on point. Rupar, a lying sack of shit who deceives people for a living in the name of his political ideology. Every word that comes out of his mouth is a lie. Goebbels was a real Rupar. He shamelessly lied and smeared anyone opposing Hitler. Definition 2, Rupar, to lie with impunity. A brazen statement with a focus on misleading, usually with intention of a predetermined outcome. Definition number 3, to purposely mislead, to intentionally and grossly mischaracterize a statement and or video. And now that we're witnessing exactly how the wrap-up smear works, you got Aaron Rupar knowingly disseminating a false statement, but he gets to rely on George Stephanopoulos for having said it, so he goes out and tweets that clip of the interview. The tweets go viral, so to speak, on Twitter. Trump alleges at least 5 such tweets that went viral that spread this malicious lie, disinformation, and here's 1 or 2 of them. Importantly, Rupar's decision to selectively repost quotes made by Stephanopoulos from the interview, explicitly and falsely stating that plaintiff had been found liable for rape, further evidences the widespread impact of false information initiated by Stephanopoulos' defamatory remarks. Mediaite News also published an article shortly after the release of the interview with the headline, quote, Fireworks, George Stephanopoulos battles Nancy Mace in explosive showdown about her backing Trump, despite jury finding he's liable for rape, end quote. Replying on the exchange during the interview, Mediaite News incorrectly published that, quote, a civil jury found plaintiff liable of rape, a judge ruled, end quote, and that, quote, Mace took offense in Stephanopoulos asking why she is supporting a man who, a judge ruled, was found to be liable for rape by a civil jury, end quote. The big problem in all of this, the Judge Kaplan in fact came out afterwards and said, yeah, sure, the jury found Trump only liable for sexual abuse only. As if that wouldn't have been enough, that's under appeal and it's a bogus finding regardless. But the judge came out and said, yeah, but he did, colloquially speaking, in fact, rape E. Jean Carroll, because although it didn't fit the definition under New York State criminal law, colloquially speaking, what he did was what everyone understands to be rape. Therefore, he did, in fact, quote, digitally rape E. Jean Carroll, and the headlines ran with that as well, as they knew they needed to, wanted to, and could do after Judge Kaplan performed that mental gymnastics, that unlawful, unjudicial mental gymnastics. He should be disbarred, he should be impeached, whatever. But he did it, and the headlines ran with it. From the Washington Post, judge clarifies, yes, Trump was found to have raped E. Jean Carroll. From Mother Jones, a federal judge has gone to great lengths to make clear Trump really did rape E. Jean Carroll. Even though the jury did not believe E. Jean Carroll's story as relates to rape, yeah, the judge came out afterwards and clarified that Trump did in fact rape E. Jean Carroll, even though the jury specifically found otherwise. This is the system. This is the kangaroo court in which we're living, the kangaroo politicized judicial system in which we're living. Even if you are found not liable for an action for civil liability in a civil lawsuit, the judge can come out afterwards and say, yeah, nonetheless, you were still civilly liable. The headlines can run with it. George Stephanopoulos can turn it into a fact, and that's why I think this is getting tossed, because Stephanopoulos can argue it's substantially true what he said, because the judge did in fact come to the finding that Trump did indeed digitally rape E. Jean Carroll. So Stephanopoulos can hang his head on the mental gymnastics of the judge. He can hang his head on the headlines run by Mother Jones, Washington Post. This is how the system works, and it's totally corrupt, and we're going to see if there's any justice whatsoever. I don't think there is going to be, and I think that the only thing this is going to accomplish is that when it gets dismissed, they are going to be able to run even harder with the headlines that Trump is indeed a rapist. It's the system we're living through right now. It's not justice, it's injustice. It is political persecution. Replace racial prejudice with political prejudice, and we are witnessing how a system can convict anybody it wants based on such prejudice. We are witnessing how the media can defame anybody they want not based on such prejudice, and not only do people not object, they encourage it, they welcome it with open arms, and my goodness, I've been getting bitten by bugs like you have no idea. I've been hiding it, but I better get inside to see what the kids are doing, get to cooking dinner, and get back to spring break. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. Viva Frei on Rumble, the Viva Frei on Twitter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. We will be talking about this lawsuit Sunday night with Robert Barnes during our Sunday night law extravaganza. And Barnes has amazing news as relates to the Amos Miller, Pennsylvania persecution. Amazing news. Stay tuned Sunday night, 6 o'clock. And get outside, eat healthy, talk to people in real life. And now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!